This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Oh, tell you what, it is this. I think this is the 9th game review that I have done now, and I just feel like we're edging closer to that win, ever so closer. Gee, I don't know. Was that the best game all year? I think it was, in terms of the quality of the footy and the contest. So let's unpack it on North Pod together. Obviously, sucks not to win again, but I thought it just showed that those last couple of weeks that we've been playing decently, we haven't fluked it. We're building that consistency. We've played well against Sydney. We've played well against Collingwood, and now Essendon. It just feels like, yeah, we're getting closer. We're edging closer to that win that we want. And it was a great game. I know I went with an Essendon supporting mate and a neutral supporter, and it was a great game of footy, a tight contest, and yeah, it just felt like it was one of those games where it sounds silly to say, but it's just about whoever's in front when the final siren goes. But, if the game goes for another 5 minutes, you never know. I feel like in that last quarter, it was going backwards and forwards quite a bit in terms of who was in front. So, yeah, disappointing to not get the win, but so many positives to come out of it. If you didn't catch the result, it was Essendon 105 defeats the Roos 99 by just that one goal. And yeah, I thought story of the game was just those North Melbourne core midfielders coming of age and competing as a collective. Phillips, Wardlaw, Sheezel, Thomas, who we'll talk about a bit later, Scott, they all just looked, like essentially ready-made AFL players now. They were classy. We looked like we were working really well together as a group offensively. And the only bit that kind of let us down was the defensive side of the game as a group. I thought there was a couple of those players were quite good individually. Wardlaw tackled well and Thomas tackled well, and Phillips wasn't too bad himself. But it's just about that full ground pressure and set up around stoppages that I think we can work on. And that's just going to come with repetition. I mean, this is the first time that these players have played together. Obviously Thomas hasn't played all year, and so therefore hasn't played with Wardlaw and Sheezel at all. So it's going to come with reps, and as we know, we did lose some of those more senior players during the course of the game. So we'll talk about that as well. Let's jump right in, I guess. So just remember to subscribe to the podcast, and you can follow me on Twitter at NorthPodShow, or Facebook or Instagram, or whatever social media platform you are into. Let's jump in to the bad. I know can be a downer, but I do prefer to look at it kind of a bit analytically at first. And there was just two, I guess, bad periods in the game that cost us. The first of those was the start of the first quarter, where we let them score 3 of the first 4 goals. And it did look at that point like it could be another one of those games where we get thoroughly beaten. There was just a few of those signs. Essendon was getting marks inside 50 and not even sort of tight in the pocket, sort of directly in front of goal. Essendon was moving the ball through the ground easier than we would like. And yeah, it just didn't look great that first sort of 15 minutes or so. But, we did come good in the first quarter eventually. And that second one, we'd got out to a nice lead early in the third quarter. I think we'd kicked maybe 6 goals in a row, and then we let Essendon kick 6 of the next 7 and just, unfortunately get themselves back in front and back in control of the game. So I think both of those periods of the game where we had such a swing in momentum was all built around our midfield just not putting enough pressure on as a group and allowing Essendon to enter their 50 too easily. and just didn't really give our defenders a chance. They were hitting players up on the lead without a lot of pressure on. Some of those shots, as I said, were shots directly in front because Essendon was able to either take it straight down the ground and take a great initial mark in the corridor, or they were marking it on the flank but then finding an inside option kind of 30 or 40 metres out. So that just speaks to the setup, and as I said in the intro, I think it's just about reps for that kind of stuff. It was only 2 periods, and if you even just take away one of those, like, we win the game. So yeah, unfortunately, we've just got to work on those lapses, and that comes with experience and by getting games into these young players. So I'm not mad about it. It's just one of those growing pains that we're going to have, I think. So yeah, that's definitely something for us to work on. Another area for us to work on, and this is probably one of the first times all year, but we were beaten in the ruck, particularly by Draper. His hit-outs to advantage really got Essendon going. Essendon had 17 hit-outs to advantage to our 10, and I think 9 of those were Goldstein. They beat us in the hit-outs in total, 49-36. And I just think that Draper was really putting it down the throat of Essendon players, who could then turn and sort of find space and generally send it forward, with some thought, not just a dump kick. They kind of were exiting clearances at the front and exiting stoppages, I should say, and looked dangerous in stages. And during those periods where Essendon got on a run, that was often with Draper getting those hit-outs to advantage and giving Essendon clearances. North did eventually come out just in front. I think we had 2 more clearances, but around the ground was where Draper was really getting us. I think we had more centre clearances, but they had more stoppage clearances. So yeah, it was just those breakaways from the stoppage that cost us. And yeah, Draper was really good. He kicked a goal, a bit of a freakish, just got it and straight onto the boot goal second half. So yeah, it was not often that I think Goldstein gets beaten, but I thought he was on the day, and he wasn't he wasn't too bad. He did kick a goal and had most of our 36 hit outs, but Draper was certainly the best ruckman on the ground, and Essendon looked most dangerous when Draper was in there hitting it down to their players. So hopefully, it's a bit of a wake-up call for Todd. He must be getting close to that 10,000 hit-outs mark now, which is exciting if he could make it. I think he'd probably need to play next year, but yeah, Draper definitely had his measure. I mean, Phillips was fine, had plenty of hit-outs and a couple to advantage, but you didn't get that sense that Phillips was going to take the game apart like it felt like Draper was at times. There were just some key moments that didn't go our way, or situations where we kind of created problems for ourselves, unfortunately. And I'm only going to list a few of those big hitters, but Larky giving away that free kick in the third quarter, he was 80 metres off the ball. He just got frustrated and sort of hit out. I think it was at Zerk Thatcher. I can't remember if it was Zerk Thatcher or Ridley, but hit out at the player playing on him, and the ball was turned over. And it had real shades of that Sydney game where it was a bit of, it's turned over and it's in Essendon's half. It wasn't quite as bad, but they kicked a goal directly from that, which, obviously hurt at that point. During the same quarter, Andrew Phillips had it sort of in the forward pocket, and put a quick kick and came off his shin, went straight in the air, went backwards. He was trying to snap it at goal, and it went backwards to about 30 metres out from goal, and somehow Martin's able to grab the mark there. I mean, the kick was a complete accident. It was a shank, but, Martin was in the right spot at the right time. I'm not really sure how a North Melbourne player didn't get a hand on it. The mark was kind of bobbled, and it was so high. Like, you just shouldn't be allowing players to mark it in that kind of area. But again, that was a bit of dumb luck. And during the last quarter, Larky took a mark, maybe 35 out, and decided to play on handballs it to Sheezel, who goes for a check side rather than maybe a drop punt, and just misses. So just a couple of those really big moments where, 2 of those cost us a goal, well, resulted in Essendon goals, and 1 resulted in us not getting a goal. And they just, they sway the game. And again, like, if you change 1 or 2 of those, and it's a different game. So a couple of those definitely of our own doing, and one a bit more unlucky, I guess. potentially. Another thing, I know it's harsh, but Zeeble really cost us, unfortunately, with his disposal at times, and he was decent in other areas. Like I don't think he really embarrassed himself in the contest at all, but he kicked 3 out on the full, a couple of those late, just costly in those key moments, and it's been something that has been recurring for him this year. I think he's good for a couple of those a week at the moment, which is not something you want to be saying about a halfback flanker. And he's got to work on it. I mean, I think it's a classic. My coaches have said it to me my whole life, and you don't want to get beaten by what you know. That's an area that, if he's kicking 2 out in the full every week, and I can think of, certainly in the Port Adelaide game, there was 2 that he did that, and they resulted in goals. There was a couple last week. Don't do it. Like, let's work on your technique. Like, if we're right up against the boundary, he's got to know that he maybe needs to try and kick it a bit more central, or get yourself carried over the line rather than kicking it off balance. Because, he just, he's doing a lot right at the moment, and I'm certainly not thinking that he should be out of the side. Nothing like that. I just think a player of his maturity and his leadership should be learning from those kind of things and not having these repeated errors where you end up kicking out of bounds on the full 3 times in a close game. And then the last negative, sort of whipping through these because there is so much positive to talk about. I just thought in those late moments we were really Larky focused. The last, I think, 3 inside 50s, certainly the last 2, were kicking it to Larky and he had 3 or 4 on him. And I get it because he's our best forward. If he's on a lead, he's pretty hard to stop. But when he's got that many on him, you'd love to be able to lower those eyes and find a free player, I guess. It's so much easier said than done. Up in the stands, you can see players free and you can kind of evaluate it. But yeah, you don't want to be that side that's always going to Larky because it becomes predictable for the opposition as much as it is predictable for us as a side. And I mean, that's the result. Players are able to drop off and spoil and contest where they otherwise wouldn't. So yeah, that's footy. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the win, but as I said, heaps of positives. So I'll try not to take too long, but I think it's only fair and reasonable that we do kind of enjoy the goods that we can. So much to go through. I've got to start with Taron Thomas. I mean, let's get out of the way. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about him playing footy at the moment for us. I would have loved a strong statement from him, just in terms of where he's at and kind of proving to us that he's made a change. There was a really faint, small spattering of boos. I thought it would be a bigger group of people booing him, to be honest, but it was barely noticeable, and it probably speaks to how much Essendon care, to be honest. Like, they probably don't even know who he is, which is fine. I think I said to my mate during the game that Essendon's North Melbourne's biggest rival, but North Melbourne's Essendon's 4th or 5th biggest rival, and I think we just have to be comfortable with that as North Melbourne fans. We're not a big club. I don't really care for the size of the club. We just, we're supporters of North Melbourne. So I wasn't expecting him to be absolutely drowned out, but I was thinking that maybe there'd be more that booed him, but it didn't really seem to, permeate through the game. Thomas was kind of shaky in the first 10 minutes. I thought, he kind of wasn't strong in a couple of contests, and early I thought, oh, geez, it's looking a lot like it did last year when his mind wasn't really in the game, but he went off pretty early in the first quarter, came back on, and he looked like a different player. He had a really good game, kicked a goal, tackled really well. Just those long penetrating kicks inside 50 to our players' advantage was, something that we've been missing. I think having him and Phillips kicking inside 50 is making a big difference for us. And yeah, I mean, he had a really good game. 17 touches, 6 tackles, kicked a goal, 23 pressure acts, which led the team for that. And yeah, it was just a really good first game back. I'm sure he'll be better for it. It's just good to have another midfielder in there who can go forward and kick a goal. Pretty much played exclusively midfield and half forward. I did wonder if he was going to come and take Aaron Hall's role off half back, and maybe there's an opportunity for him to do that. But yeah, he was so good particularly in the midfield. He didn't do a whole lot when he went forward, but I think a lot of that was opportunity. I think we got the most out of him in the midfield, I guess. So it was good to have a player of his quality back. That's the sort of thing that we need. I really think that I hope that he has turned his life around, and this is the start of something positive. But I guess we'll wait and see how the season develops. Something that we haven't been great at this year is efficiency inside 50, and we were actually pretty good at this, particularly in the start of the game. We really didn't get inside forward 50 much in that first quarter. I thought we were pretty fortunate to end up with 3 goals in the first quarter, and I guess it's just a credit to Larky and Zerha and Coleman Jones and Steve-O for just really bringing it. And I guess the 4 of them have been playing together for a couple of weeks now, and I mean Larky, Zerha and Steve-O all year, more or less. And we're starting to see, I guess, the fruits of that chemistry and unselfish play. I thought Zerha was, didn't do a whole lot at the start of the game, and he ended up with 4 goals and was possibly our best forward. Coleman Jones took a really great, fantastic contested mark. I'm not even sure. I don't even know how he snagged it, to be honest. He sort of only used one hand. And he had a couple of good contested marks in the wing again, which is what we saw from him in that Sydney game. So, yeah, we've seen some really positive signs from Coleman Jones over the last month or so, including that big haul in the VFL. But yeah, we were much more efficient inside 50, which was, I guess, partly what kept us in the game. We scored 52% of the time that we went inside 50, so more than half the time. Our season average has been 43.5%, so much improved on that. We were 4.5% more efficient than Essendon. So yeah, I thought we were really impressive with the way that we both kick it inside 50, and also, for the most part, we were pretty accurate. I know I talked about Sheezel missing that one earlier, but aside from that, there was no real glaring misses where you went, geez, how's he done that? So yeah, that was pleasing to see. The next positive, the second quarter, we kept Essendon goalless and kicked 3 ourselves. So it wasn't a great, that was probably the least viewable or least enjoyable watch for a neutral fan that second quarter. But yeah, keeping Essendon goalless. And it was just a lot of credit to McKay, particularly given, he wasn't great last week. I called him out. I feel like most media that talked about in North Melbourne or who were interested in North Melbourne called him out last week. And he had a fantastic bounce back game. He and Logue really generaled the defensive 50 this week. Langford was really the only forward who looked consistently dangerous, and he did end up with 4, spent a fair bit of time on Logue, so I thought McKay was certainly the better player. McKay played most of the time on Wiedemann, who really didn't get near it. So yeah, it was a great game from McKay in that second quarter where the defence just stood up and repelled all of those Essendon efforts. Was fantastic. McKay ended up with 10 marks, 18 touches, 14 intercept possessions. Obviously, several of those were marks. I think he had 2 contested grabs and 100% disposal efficiency. So none of those absolute howlers, clangers that he's had when he's had an off week. He was really clean, didn't make those errors, and was rarely outmarked. I can't remember too many where he was thoroughly outmarked. So yeah, it was a great defensive game, and in particular McKay, it was just so good to see him bounce back. I saw he got a couple of coaches' votes, which was well deserved. Yeah, it was great to see him up and about again, and hopefully he can continue that into the next 2 weeks, because we know that he's had a pretty inconsistent and sometimes down season. So hopefully this is the start of some positivity for him. The next positive, it's not. It doesn't start off positive. Simpkin subbed out during the second quarter. Greenwood subbed out at Hartwell. Didn't play after half time. Both of them with concussion. So that's negative. But the positive to come from that was just the young midfield really stepped up. And I sort of touched on most of them off the top. But, Phillips backed up his performance from last week. He had 27 touches, kicked a goal, had 6 tackles. Tucker had 24 touches, 1 goal, 7 marks. Wardlaw, Sheezel and Thomas were all good as well. I thought Bailey Scott, whilst he wasn't as prolific as he's been the last few weeks, he was pretty clean. And as I said earlier, it's good to have those mids pushing up and kicking goals and not leaving it all up to Larky and Zerha and Stevo. So, yeah, it was fantastic to see. There was just so many of those sort of glimmers of hope that we've been looking for with that midfield that really impressed me. Again, I mean, Phillips is doing so much grunt work, had more handballs and kicks again. I would like to see him getting on the end of a few more passages so he can be kicking it inside 50 because he is a great kick. But yeah, just so many of those young mids coming together, playing together, and yeah, in terms of our offense, it was really promising. So that was great to see. Obviously, it's not good to have Simpkin and Greenwood out, but we really stood up, and I thought at times we actually looked better than we have with Simpkin and LDU in there. So, and again, I'm not saying that they don't come back in because they obviously absolutely do. But all of that is to say is there's a lot of class in there, and I think we're finally sort of starting to see what those early draft picks in Thomas, Sheezel, Wardlaw, Phillips can do. So that was really promising. I've got 2 more quick ones for positives, and I'm sorry, I'm just, if we have a good game, we've got to get all those positives out. I thought Spicer had the best game I've seen him play, but it was all of his defensive work. With the ball, he's still a bit questionable, kind of figuring out his limits. With that jump up from the VFL, he's sort of still looking like he's not really sure what to do with the ball when he gets it. But defensively, I thought he had a really good game. He tackled well. He had 9 tackles. And those tackles and those pressure acts that he was putting on was actually impacting the Essendon players, which I think has been on the knock on him for the past couple of weeks, where he's been getting close, he's been pressure acting, and he's been sort of swarming, but I don't know that he's had an impact. So he did laid 9 tackles, and his pressure, I think, was making a difference to the disposal and what Essendon was doing. So it's that if he can keep doing that and then add that offensive dangerousness to his game, I think, that'd be fantastic. We'll see, because I feel confident now that he can do the defensive stuff. It's just whether or not he can also bob up for a goal or 2 a game. And I mean, what I would love is to have that small forward like a Tom Papley or a Charlie Cameron who can do both and, really go off. Like, it's how often is Charlie Cameron kicking multiple goals? And same for Papley. Like, you want that small forward that can really kick sort of 4 or 5 and have a night out, as well as put that intense defensive pressure on. And I think, since Lindsay Thomas, we haven't had that, and I wouldn't have called Lindsay Thomas an elite defensive player either. He was certainly geared more towards kicking goals, which, he did pretty well most of the time. But yeah, Spicer earned his spot for mine. I think he's earned himself a couple of more weeks through to the bye at least. And the last positive, just some really promising packages of play where we were standing up in those tackles. I can think of one that came out from a centre clearance where definitely Wardlaw and Phillips were involved, maybe Thomas as well, I think, where they were sort of tackled and spun and held their hips, got a handball off kind of the last minute, and that resulted in a Zerha goal. And it's just sort of those plays where in the past couple of years that we've, haven't been strong enough, we've turned it over and it's ended up going over our heads for a goal. Similarly, there was and I'm sorry, I don't really remember this one with enough detail, but we whipped it down the wing and we're just taking the game on and hitting targets. And it was the sort of thing where in the past we would have, shanked it off someone's shin and turned it over for a goal, and it didn't turn out. So there's just a few of those elite passages where they're actually starting to come off for us. And we're not being hurt by the inevitable turnovers that we had from the past couple of years. So, I mean, look, we're not going to be able to do that every time, and you don't need to be able to score like that every time. You want to be able to score the easy goals as well. But it was really nice to see a couple of those passages, coming off. It's sort of unrecognisable when you see that at the moment. So, yeah, that was good. All right, moving on. We've got lots to get through this week. So I did put out a tweet after the game just asking for some thoughts, and as you can imagine, there's plenty of positivity, which is great. So I'm just going to read through a couple. I'm sorry if I don't read yours. As I said, there's lots to get through this week. So just a couple, I guess, thought-provoking or interesting ones that I'd like to, I guess, discuss. Michael at M_P_C87 says CCJ is starting to get some consistency and good body of work. The confidence in this group is building in terms of connection and game plan. The kids are fearless, seeing a change in attitude around not wanting to lose games of footy anymore, and they look motivated to improve. And I agree with all of that. I think what was interesting to me is seeing all of these young players come in. And when I say the young players, I'm talking about Sheezel, Wardlaw, Phillips, Ford, Spicer. These players that, sure, they've been around the club when we've been losing some of them, but haven't, they've played less than 10 games. I think they have less of that kind of like loser mentality, for want of a better word. Like, they're not conditioned to losing. And I think in someone like Wardlaw, you really see that absolute hunger, and there's not a single part of him that's going, oh, this again, because it's his third or fourth game of footy. So yeah, I would agree, Michael. I am seeing that shift, and it's really positive. Jeff Donny asked CCJ or Conman who's in front, and I think it's worth remembering that obviously Conman will come back at the very end of the year, and it looks like Cherry might be ready to return to footy sort of around the bye or just after. So I really hope that we use that time, experimentally at the end of the year to see, is it possible to play all of our tools? I tend to think it probably will be possible. Just what I mean by that is once Goldie's gone, whether that's next year or the year after or whenever that is, I think if Cherry's our main ruck and CCJ's giving him a chop out, and we have Larkey and Comben in the forward line, I'd like to think that particularly Comben and Larkey are kind of mobile enough that we can play all of them. I'm sure everything's matchup dependent, and maybe some weeks that is just too tall, but I'm sure on the other side you can look at it and go, well, that's our advantage. We've got those tall players, and how can we use that? But I mean, Coleman Jones is a really tall player. He's ruck size. He should be able to take those contested grabs. We've seen Coleman can really run and jump at the ball. So I would like to think that we can play all of them in the future. I don't think we can play all of them right now with Goldie still on the list. I think it's Goldie or Cherry right now. I don't think we can play either of those, but I would like to see Cherry later in the year if he gets back. So that's one to watch, I guess. Joe Cosenza says green shoots are growing, and yeah, I think that really summed the game up for me. It was a lot of positivity, and sure, we lost, and I hate losing, but we try and look at the positive side here at North Pod, and I saw a lot of positives out there. I'll end it on this one. Messiah 17. We could have won. Really liked Wardlaw and Sheezel, and I thought Phoenix Spicer played his best game and showed what he is capable of. And that is a repeat, I guess, of what I've talked about. So you're ahead of the 8-ball Messiah. I just thought so much positivity to come out of that game, and I didn't want to let that go from Twitter. Let's have a look at some of the news from the week. I am going to try and whip through this because I don't want to go on for too long and make this a 75-hour long podcast. I did talk a couple of weeks ago about the AFL investigation into the Hawks racism, and obviously it involves Clarko, who is our coach. But I really just don't feel comfortable talking about it beyond to say the AFL's shut it down. Some of those Hawks players have come out and I guess revealed who they are and are going to take it to the Human Rights Commission. It seems like the story has got a long way to play out, and I just don't feel qualified / I just don't think it's worth discussing. Like, I think, this is a footy podcast, and obviously that's an issue that surrounds football, but, there's two sides to every story. It's really hard to know where that story is going to go. And I think to some of those people that are out here making really, direct statements, I think you want to be careful about what side of history you might end up on, I guess, because there's just so much that the public doesn't know. And even if the public thinks they know, and you might not. So look, we'll see. I really hope that, for our sake, that it works out for the best and that Clarko can get back to the club as soon as possible. But yeah, beyond that, I just think it's a wait and watch, and we see what happens. Similarly, I sort of talked about it, but it was great to have Thomas back. I hope that he's better for it and become a better person. And hopefully it's just we can talk about his footy for the rest of the year. But it was good to see him back kicking a goal. Obviously, the boys did get around him. So, and as I said during earlier in the pod, he's a class above. So that was good. In the mid-season draft, I'm sure you diehards were following that. We ended up picking up Robert Hansen Jr., small forward out of Subiaco in the Waffle. Hadn't been a heap of talk about him up until the last couple of days, certainly in the media. I know that there was plenty of North fans out there looking for a Lawson, and then there was talk about, I think it was Clay Tucker potentially that died off. But Robert Hansen Jr. looks like, he fits that role that I talked about last week. We just really don't have a small forward that can do it all for us. So it doesn't hurt to take a punt in the mid-season draft. We haven't had a heap of success at the mid-season draft since its inception, but by the same token, there's not many success stories out there really. Obviously there's John Noble and Jai Newcomb and Marlon Pickett. Like, there's a handful, but for the most part, the players are available because they weren't drafted, because they weren't deemed to be elite talent. So obviously there are plenty of players who slip through the cracks, and we hope that Robert Hansen Jr. is one of those, and he certainly is the type of player that we need. But I think we do need to temper our expectations around what he could potentially bring. It sounds like he's available for selection as of this week. I'd be pretty surprised if we saw him before the bye. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we didn't see him all year, to be honest. If things are going well for a Spicer, like maybe that's not a need. But yeah, I mean, I hope to see him. I hope that he plays well at VFL level and gets a call up. But yeah, I think we do have to remember that he doesn't know anything about our game plan. He's been playing in the Waffle. He's moving his life over to Victoria. Let's temper expectations, I guess. Speaking of the VFL, this is the last bit of news. They had another win, which, is a bit foreign to us too. Generally, the AFL side and the VFL side's fortunes have kind of mirrored each other the last couple of years. But yeah, came from behind, kicked the last 3 goals to beat Essendon in the VFL. I saw parts of the game. I didn't see all of it, but looking at the stats and I guess the parts of the game that I did watch, Lazaro, Cunnington and Howe were all pretty good. Got plenty of the ball. Paul Curtis had 7 tackles and kicked 2 goals. Did a lot of his good work early. So they were, I guess, the players that looked like they were most likely to push for selection, or at least have been in the selection frame. And yeah, it's just good to have that. You want that winning culture underneath. Because eventually you're developing that depth and it becomes hot for selection. I think we're heading in that direction. Got a VFL side that's kind of mid-table now, so we'll take that over where we've been. Looking ahead to next week's game down in Hobart against GWS. It's on Sunday afternoon. I think it's the 3:20 game this time, so at least it's not that troubling 4:40 twilight match. It should be a good chance for a potential win, I think. Obviously, we play pretty well in Hobart historically. It's not quite the advantage that it once was, but yeah, playing a side like GWS down there gives us a chance. They've been a bit up and down. Just lost to Richmond on the weekend, which, gosh, I was barracking for them. But I think it is a chance for us. In terms of potential ins and outs, I mean, we know, unfortunately, Simpkin and Greenwood are going to be out with those concussion protocols, so they'll miss this week. which is obviously a big loss. Simpkin being our co-captain and Greenwood's been in really good form lately. That is unfortunate, but I guess, brings opportunity with it. I'm going to say all this assuming that Davies-Uniacke isn't quite ready yet. I know that last week, I think he was listed as 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 weeks, and I just, with a player like that, I don't know, I can't see us risking it and bringing him back any earlier than we need to. So, assuming that he's not ready, it does seem like maybe this is Cunnington's chance to get back in as a bit of a straight swap with Greenwood. I know that I can't remember if it was Viney or Ratton said that the club's pretty much decided that they're not going to play them both at the same time. So with Greenwood having a week off, maybe this is a chance for Cunnington to play. To me, that seems like a logical straight swap, and then it's just around what are we doing with Jai, and maybe that's Lazaro coming back in. It's just as likely it could be Howe. I know there's plenty of fans that don't want to be Howe, but I could understand bringing a bit of experience in with experience coming out. I could see that. Similarly, I guess it could be a Drury. Goda's not ready yet, and I'm sure he'll come back in through the VFL. I mean, he's a defender anyway. I'm just sort of naming those kind of players that we want to see in, I guess. I think it would be a great opportunity for Powell to get a bit of actual proper midfield minutes, because at the moment I feel like he just seems a bit lost in his development. He's not, playing enough midfield, which I think is his preferred role, and half forward and half back, he just doesn't seem to really know what he's doing back there, which, he hasn't played there, I'm sure, as a junior. I'm sure he's only played midfield, so maybe with both of those two out, maybe Powell gets his chance to jump into this really stacked young midfield. The only other player I sort of want to note was I don't think Aaron Hall needs to be in the side, and I guess it's the classic who do you replace him with at the moment. I think Gota long term, I think, is where I'd like to see him replaced. Core is not, giving us the same as what Aaron Hall is. Core is more of a lockdown defender. I think Core and Zeeble are kind of more applicable swaps. But Hall just is, he's damaging us in the wrong ways at the moment. So he's probably the one that didn't really impress me on the weekend, and could be an optional out, if that's the right word, like not a forced omission. But I mean, the rest of the side, we played so well, you'd like for most of them to get another shot and just replace those injured players. And then, I guess hopefully look ahead to after the bye, we can get Cherry back in potentially and get LDU back in and maybe see what our best 22 looks like with virtually no injuries. Well, that's the plan at least. So, I think I said last week we've got GWS and then the bye. I was 1 week ahead. We've got GWS and then we've got the Dogs and then we've got the bye. We're in that last group of byes. So we've got 2 games to get through. I'd love to win one of them, and certainly GWS lurks as the most likely. The Dogs have generally put us away in the last few years, but look, you never know. We're playing well. It's I'm feeling positive. I know it's a heartbreaking way to lose on the weekend, but I am feeling really positive about the last 3 weeks, and I hope that all you North fans are as well. So that does it for the podcast. I hope that I was able to be positive enough and kind of get you all up and about and feeling good about the Roo Boys like I am. Please remember to subscribe and give me a review on Apple Podcast or on Spotify. It really helps get the podcast out there and surface it to as many people as possible. Give me a follow on Twitter at NorthPod Show, on Facebook, Instagram, whatnot. Feel free to get in touch or just have a chat about the footy, because that's what we're here for. We're here because we love the Roos. And hopefully we can go into next week and have a great showing against the Giants down in Hobart. So hope you all have a great week. Let's go Roos.